Galactic slavers took a human diplomat hostage. Earth answered with a ninja. The observation deck of Kepler station offered a view that still took Ambassador Chen Wei's breath away, even after 3 weeks in space. Thousands of ships moved through the darkness like fireflies, each one carrying species from corners of the galaxy humanity had only dreamed about 12 years ago. Chen adjusted his tie and tried not to think about the weight on his shoulders. At 43, he was young for an ambassador, but Earth needed people who understood that humanity was the newcomer at a very old table. One wrong move, one cultural mistake, and the fragile trade agreements could collapse. "Ambassador, they're ready for you," said Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, head of his security detail. She was professional, competent, and carried a sidearm that looked like a toy compared to the plasma weapons other species carried. Chen nodded and followed her toward Conference Room 7. His 3 aides walked behind him, carrying data tablets filled with economic projections and trade proposals. This meeting with the Vrax Consortium could change everything. Earth needed allies, needed trade partners, needed to prove they belonged in galactic society. The Vrax representatives were already seated when Chen entered. There were 5 of them, tall and reptilian, with scales that shimmered between blue and purple. Their leader, who introduced himself as Vraxnal, had eyes that reminded Chen of a snake watching a mouse. "Ambassador Chen," Vraxnal said, his translator device rendering his hissing speech into perfect English. "We are pleased to finally meet humanity's representative. I believe we can reach an agreement that benefits both our peoples." They offered shipping routes and trade concessions that seemed almost generous. Chen's instincts, honed through 20 years of diplomatic service, began to whisper warnings. Something felt wrong. He glanced at his senior aide, Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, and saw the same concern in her eyes. "Perhaps we should take a short break," Chen suggested. "Review the specific details before we—" Armored figures rushed into the room, moving with practiced precision. They weren't Vrax. These creatures were larger, with gray-green skin and faces that looked like they belonged on predators. Their armor was black and covered with weapons. Lieutenant Mitchell moved fast, drawing her sidearm and stepping in front of Chen. She managed to fire 3 shots before a blue energy beam hit her. She collapsed, her body jerking as electricity coursed through her. Chen's other 2 security officers fell within seconds. They didn't even have time to call for help. "Do not move, humans," one of the armored figures said. His voice was deep and filled with satisfaction. "You are now property of the Talruvian Acquisition Corporation." He knew the name from intelligence briefings. They were slavers, one of several species that traded in sentient beings. Most of the galaxy considered them distasteful, but tolerated them through complicated legal frameworks and old treaties. And the Vrax had led them directly into a trap. Vraxnal stood, his earlier politeness gone. "Forgive the deception, Ambassador, but your species represents a unique opportunity. Humans are weak physically, but intelligent enough for complex labor. The market for your kind will be quite profitable." But Chen wasn't reaching for a weapon. His fingers found the small device hidden in his jacket lining. Earth's intelligence services had given it to him before he left, though they said he'd probably never need it. It was a distress beacon, military grade, designed to punch through jamming and reach Earth instantly. He pressed the activation sequence. A Talruvian guard noticed the movement and slammed an armored fist into Chen's stomach. The ambassador doubled over, gasping for air, but his finger had already pressed the final button. Somewhere in the device's tiny processors, an emergency message was being compressed and transmitted across light years. "Search them," the Talruvian commander ordered. The guards moved efficiently, pulling Chen and his 3 aides to their feet. Dr. Okonkwo was crying silently. Young James Park, fresh out of graduate school and on his first deep space assignment, looked terrified. Maria Santos, Chen's protocol officer, stared straight ahead, her jaw clenched. They found the beacon in Chen's pocket. The Talruvian commander examined it, then crushed it in his armored hand. A distress call. How quaint. He stepped closer to Chen. Let me explain your situation, human. This station is neutral territory. The local security forces cannot interfere with legal acquisitions. Your species has no military presence in this sector. By the time Earth organizes a response, you will be processed and distributed to buyers across 6-star systems. Earth is a backwater planet full of primitives. You've been in space for barely a decade. What will you do? File a complaint with the Galactic Council, by all means. They'll schedule a hearing in 6 to 8 months. They watched the scene with various expressions of curiosity or indifference. None of them moved to help. Chen understood then what the galaxy was really like. It had rules and laws and councils, but it operated on cold pragmatism. Humanity was new, weak, and friendless. No one would risk conflict with the Talruvians over 4 humans. They were marched through the station at gunpoint. Chen tried to memorize details, thinking like the intelligence officer he'd been before becoming a diplomat. The Talruvian ship was called the Crimson Harvest. It was docked at Bay 47. There were at least 20 Talruvian guards visible, probably more inside the ship. As they approached the docking tube, Chen made one last attempt. I am a diplomatic representative of Earth, protected under. Chen tasted blood. You are merchandise, the guard said simply. They were pushed into the ship. The interior was cold and metallic, with rows of what looked like storage pods lining the walls. Chen's stomach turned when he saw movement in some of the pods, other prisoners, other species, all looking out with dead eyes. The Talruvians separated the 4 humans. Chen was taken to a small cell, barely large enough to stand in. Through the transparent wall, he could see Dr. Okonkwo being pushed into the cell next to his. She was no longer crying. Her face had gone blank, a defensive shutdown. The Talruvian commander approached Chen's cell. You will be held here for 72 hours, he said. During that time, you'll be given basic conditioning. You'll learn to accept your new status. Humans who cooperate receive better placements. Those who resist, he smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Well, there are always buyers who prefer broken merchandise. You have no idea what you've done. The ambassador slumped against the wall and let himself feel the fear he'd been suppressing. But underneath the fear was something else. A certainty. He'd gotten the message out. Earth knew what had happened. Chen didn't know exactly what Earth would do. Humanity had been in space for such a short time, had so little military power compared to the established species. But he knew one thing with absolute confidence. Earth would do something. 73,000 light-years away, in an unmarked building in Tokyo, an emergency alert began flashing on a screen. A woman in plain civilian clothes read the message, her face expressionless. Code Black. Diplomatic personnel captured. Talruvian involvement confirmed. She stood and walked to a secure communication terminal. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. When she hung up, she began preparing for a journey. Her name was Take Yuki, though very few people knew what that name really meant. The Talruvians had made their first mistake when they took Ambassador Chen. Their second mistake was assuming Earth would respond the way other civilized species did. They would learn soon enough that humanity played by different rules. The emergency session of Earth Security Council had been going for 3 hours, and they were getting nowhere. We need to send the fleet, insisted General Morrison, slamming his fist on the table. Show these aliens we won't tolerate this. Do the math, General. Offer compensation. We have resources they might want. Set a precedent that humans can be taken, and Earth will just hand over credits. Her movement was small, but something about it made everyone fall silent. There is another option, she said quietly. All eyes turned to her. Helen touched her tablet and a holographic image appeared above the conference table. It showed a woman in her early 30s, Asian features, unremarkable appearance. The kind of person you'd pass on the street without noticing. "This is Take the Yuki," Helen said. "She's one of 12 operatives in a program we call Ghost Protocol. We found something interesting. They fight with honor. They declare their intentions. They follow strict combat protocols that go back thousands of years. While the galaxy was developing rules of engagement, Earth was perfecting the art of asymmetric warfare, special forces, intelligence operations, stealth tactics. The galaxy has warriors. We have something they've never encountered." One moment she was there, the next she disappeared into shadows that shouldn't have been deep enough to hide anyone. For the past 8 years, Ghost Protocol has been training operatives in techniques adapted from Earth's most effective covert traditions. Ninjutsu, Spetsnaz tactics, SAS methods, Mossad intelligence operations. We've combined them with new technology and adapted them for alien environments. Against a ship full of armed slavers. They've never faced an enemy who specializes in becoming invisible to sensors. Ambassador Chen has 72 hours before he's moved to a processing facility deep in Talruvian space. After that, we'll never get him back. A military operation would take weeks to plan and would probably start a war we can't win. Diplomatic channels will take months and might fail completely. She's really that good. The timestamp showed it took her 11 minutes. She's had 8 years of preparation for exactly this type of mission, Helen continued. She speaks 4 alien languages. She studied Talruvian psychology and ship design. She knows their security protocols better than they do. Let me talk to her first. I want to hear what she says. 20 minutes later, Take the Yuki entered the conference room. She was shorter than her hologram suggested, maybe 5'4", dressed in simple civilian clothes. She moved with economy, no wasted motion. "Operative Yuki," Morrison said. "Director Park says you can get our people back. Explain to me how this works." They've never considered the possibility of someone being inside their perimeter without them knowing. Environmental systems, maintenance shafts, cargo areas. They don't guard these because their sensors tell them no one is there. Everything I need will be organic compounds, carbon fiber polymers. To their scanners, I'll look like a civilian passenger. A human neck breaks with approximately 11 pounds of pressure applied correctly. Talruvian anatomy is similar. I don't need a plasma rifle to be lethal, Ambassador. I just need the guards to not know I'm there until it's too late. This woman spoke about killing with the same tone someone might use to discuss repair work. "The mission timeline," he asked. "I'll insert via civilian freighter to a known Talruvian waypoint. The Meridian Drift makes regular runs, and the captain can be persuaded to carry an extra passenger. I'll have approximately 60 hours from insertion to extraction point. That's what Ghost Protocol does. If we do nothing, it tells the galaxy that humans can be taken without consequence. That can't be the message we send. And someone has to show the galaxy that humanity doesn't abandon its people, that will come for them no matter what. Might as well be me." Transportation to the insertion point, and updated intelligence on the Crimson Harvest's current position. In the preparation facility beneath Tokyo, Yuki began assembling her equipment. Each item looked innocent but had been designed for lethal purpose. A necklace made of carbon fiber wire strong enough to support her weight or cut through flesh. Earrings that were actually compressed oxygen capsules. A lipstick tube containing nanite adhesive that could seal a hull breach or glue a door shut. Boot heels with polymer blades that wouldn't register on scans. Her contact lenses contained microcameras that would record everything she saw. A modified dental filling held an encrypted communicator. Her jacket was woven with chameleon fiber that could shift colors to match her surroundings. Director Park watched from the observation window. "Second thoughts?" she asked over the intercom. "No, ma'am." Yuki continued her preparations, testing each piece of equipment. "The Tauruvians won't expect you, but if they catch you, they're predators, Director. They're used to hunting prey that runs or fights directly. They've never hunted something that hunts them back." "Good hunting, Yuki." No one on the ship gave her a second glance. That was exactly what she wanted. The Crimson Harvest was 3 days away. Ambassador Chen and his team were running out of time, but they didn't know that help was coming. Silent, invisible help that moved through shadows. The Tauruvians had taken a human diplomat. Earth had answered with a ghost. The Meridian Drift docked at Outpost Xerxes exactly on schedule. The station was a massive structure built into an asteroid, serving as a fueling depot and marketplace for the less reputable corners of the galaxy. Takeda Yuki waited in her cramped passenger cabin until the cargo transfer began. Through her small window, she could see dozens of ships docked at various platforms. Somewhere among them was the Crimson Harvest. The freighter's captain, a four-armed Voltine named Crix, hadn't asked questions when Yuki paid triple the normal fare in untraceable credits. He simply gave her a cabin and told her to stay out of sight. Now, as workers swarmed the ship to unload cargo, he was conveniently looking the other way. Yuki pulled on her jacket and checked her equipment one final time. Everything was in place. To anyone scanning her, she'd appear as a civilian with some jewelry and personal items. Nothing threatening. She slipped out of her cabin during a shift change when the corridors were busiest. Workers hauled containers and argued in a dozen languages. No one noticed one small human woman moving with the crowd. The station's interior was chaos. Hundreds of species mingled in the markets and corridors. The air smelled of exotic foods, fuel, and something Yuki couldn't identify. Perfect. Chaos meant opportunity. She found a maintenance access panel exactly where Earth intelligence said it would be. The galaxy species might have advanced technology, but they still needed maintenance shafts and air circulation systems. And they still didn't post guards at every access point. The panel opened with a twist of her carbon fiber wire. Yuki slipped inside and sealed it behind her. The maintenance shaft was cramped and dark. Yuki activated her contact lenses' low-light enhancement and began moving deeper into the station. According to the schematics she'd memorized, the Crimson Harvest was docked 3 platforms away. It took her 40 minutes of crawling through shafts and ducking past automated systems to reach Platform 7. She paused at an air vent and looked down. The Crimson Harvest sat below her like a sleeping predator. It was larger than she'd expected, maybe 300 feet long, with weapon ports visible along its hull. A cargo ramp was extended, and Tauruvian guards stood at the entrance. 2 guards, both armed with plasma rifles, both looking bored. Yuki watched them for 20 minutes, timing their movements. Every 12 minutes, one would walk a circuit around the immediate area while the other stayed at the ramp. Professional enough to maintain protocol, but casual enough to show they didn't expect threats. They'd never had to worry about threats before. Yuki checked her chronometer. She had 58 hours before Ambassador Chen was moved. Time to get started. She crawled through the vent system until she found what she was looking for, an external atmospheric vent on the station's hull. It was designed to expel contaminated air, positioned on a section of the platform with no foot traffic. Yuki opened the vent and squeezed through. For a moment, she was outside the station, hanging above the asteroid's surface in the vacuum of space. Her modified jacket's emergency seal activated, giving her 90 seconds of protection. She used her nanite adhesive to attach to the station's hull and began moving along the outside, invisible to anyone looking from inside. 30 seconds later, she reached the Crimson Harvest's docking clamp. The ship's maintenance hatch was right where intelligence said it would be. These hatches were designed for emergency repairs and were rarely locked. The Talruvians probably didn't even remember they existed. Yuki slipped inside and sealed the hatch behind her. Her jacket's seal released as atmosphere rushed in. She was aboard. The interior of the ship was cold and utilitarian. Metal walls, harsh lighting, and the hum of engines. Yuki stayed in the shadows, listening. Voices echoed from somewhere ahead, Talruvian guards talking about their next port. She moved silently through the lower deck, mapping the layout in her mind. The ship matched the schematics, but she needed to confirm the locations of prisoners and guards. A Talruvian guard appeared around a corner, walking alone. He was massive, nearly 7 feet tall, with gray-green skin and armor that covered most of his body. He carried a plasma rifle casually over his shoulder. He never saw Yuki in the shadows above him. She'd climbed into the ceiling supports using her adhesive pads. The Talruvians, like most species, never looked up. Why would they? Their sensors told them if threats were present. The guard passed beneath her, still talking into his communicator about how boring this assignment was. Yuki waited until he turned another corner, then dropped silently to the floor and continued her exploration. She found the holding cells on the ship's middle deck. Through a partially open door, she could see rows of transparent cells. Her heart clenched when she spotted Ambassador Chen in one of them. He was sitting on a metal bench, his face bruised. Dr. Okonkwo was in the next cell, staring at nothing. But Yuki saw more. Other cells held other humans. She counted 12 total. Some wore the uniforms of a mining corporation. Others looked like civilians. All of them had the same dead expression. A massive Talruvian stood in the center of the room, his back to Yuki. He was talking to Chen, his voice filled with amusement. "Tomorrow we begin conditioning," the Talruvian was saying. "A simple neural procedure. You'll remain conscious, but your resistance will fade. Most species break within 3 sessions." The Talruvian laughed. "Defiance, I appreciate that. It makes the breaking more satisfying." Now she knew the layout, the guard patterns, and where the prisoners were held. But she had a problem: 12 hostages, one of her, and at least 20 armed guards on the ship. A direct rescue was impossible. She needed to change the equation. Yuki made her way to the ship's environmental control center. It was a small room filled with panels and displays, completely unguarded. Why would it be guarded? The Talruvian security focused on preventing escape and boarding, not on protecting internal systems. She pulled a small device from her jacket, a code cracker that Earth intelligence had designed specifically for Talruvian systems. It took 3 minutes to bypass the security and access the environmental controls. Yuki didn't sabotage anything. Not yet. But she planted a backdoor that would let her access the systems remotely through her communicator. Lights, temperature, gravity, life support, all of it would be under her control when she needed it. Next, she found the ship's armory. 2 guards stood outside, alert and armed. Yuki couldn't access it without being detected, so she didn't try. Instead, she found the power junction that fed the armory's security systems. A few careful cuts with her polymer blade and the backup power was disabled. The guards wouldn't notice until the main power failed. She was creating a web of vulnerabilities, points of failure that she could exploit when the time came. Hour by hour, Yuki moved through the ship like a ghost. She planted micro-cameras in key corridors. She identified which guards were alert and which were lazy. She found emergency exits and escape routes. She learned which sections had blind spots in their sensor coverage. The Talruvians never knew she was there. 18 hours after boarding, Yuki was ready to begin the next phase. She waited until the shift change at midnight ship time, when guards were tired and less attentive. A lone guard walked toward the waste disposal area, probably looking for a quiet place to take a break. Yuki had watched him do this 3 times already. He always came alone. Always stayed for 10 minutes. She waited in the darkness as he approached. The guard entered the disposal area and leaned against the wall, pulling out a small device, the Tauruvian equivalent of a cigarette. He never heard Yuki drop from the ceiling behind him. Her carbon fiber wire wrapped around his throat before he could make a sound. She pulled tight, cutting off his air and blood flow. The guard struggled, trying to reach his weapon, but Yuki had positioned herself perfectly. His own body blocked his arms from reaching the rifle. 15 seconds. That's how long it took for him to lose consciousness. Yuki lowered him to the floor and checked his pulse. Still alive, just unconscious. She didn't want to kill unless necessary. Dead bodies created more urgency than missing guards. She stripped him of his access card and communicator, then dragged him into a waste container scheduled for disposal in 3 days. By the time they found him, this would all be over. 1 guard down, 19 to go, but now alarms began to blare throughout the ship. Yuki's blood ran cold. Had they found the unconscious guard already? Had she triggered a sensor? Then she heard Vrexnel's voice over the ship's intercom. All guards, full alert. We have detected an unauthorized access to environmental controls. Someone is aboard this ship. Find them. They didn't realize they were the prey. Vrexnel stared at the security display, his scaled hands clenched into fists. Someone had accessed the environmental controls. Someone was on his ship. Run a complete sensor sweep, he ordered his second-in-command. Every deck, every section. I want thermal imaging, motion detectors, everything. If we involve station security, there will be investigations, delays. We handle this internally. They found nothing. In the ventilation shaft above Deck 3, Yuki remained perfectly still. She triggered the fire suppression system in this section, flooding it with cryofoam that masked heat signatures. The thermal scanners passed right over her position, detecting only the foam's cold temperature. She watched through a vent as 2 guards searched the corridor below. They were thorough, checking behind equipment and inside storage lockers, but they never looked up. They trusted their scanners to detect threats. Section clear, 1 guard reported into his communicator. They moved on. Yuki waited 5 minutes, then carefully crawled deeper into the ventilation system. The ship was on full alert now, which actually worked to her advantage. Guards were focused on finding an intruder, which meant they'd pulled back from routine patrols. The areas between their search patterns were less protected than before. Yuki reached a junction where 3 ventilation shafts met. From here, she could access most of the ship. She pulled out her communicator and checked the micro cameras she'd planted earlier. The feed showed guards concentrated on decks 2 and 3, searching methodically. The holding cells on Deck 4 were guarded by 4 Tauruvians now instead of the usual 2. And Vrexnel himself was in the command center, watching multiple displays. They were reacting exactly as she'd expected. Predictable, trained, following protocols designed to catch conventional infiltrators. Yuki activated the backdoor she'd planted in the environmental controls. The lights in Section 7B flickered once, then went completely dark. Through her camera feed, she watched guards rush toward the darkened section. 3 minutes later, the lights in Section 4A failed. What's happening? Vrexnel's voice came over the communicator channels. Unknown, Commander. The systems are malfunctioning. Yuki moved through the darkness to a junction box and made a few careful modifications. Then she triggered her next surprise. Throughout the ship, doors began opening and closing randomly. Storage compartments, crew quarters, even the bathroom facilities. It wasn't dangerous, just chaotic and unnerving. Secure the environmental control room, Vrexnel ordered, and find me that intruder. She had maybe 90 seconds before they realized environmental control was empty. She sprinted silently to the ship's medical bay. The door was locked, but the access card she'd taken from the unconscious guard worked perfectly. Inside, she found what she needed: sedatives and medical supplies. Yuki loaded a syringe with enough sedative to drop a Tauruvian for 6 hours. Then she noticed something else. A storage locker marked with biohazard symbols. Inside were stun grenades designed for use in slave conditioning. She took 3 of them. Voices approached outside. Yuki climbed onto the medical bay's ceiling supports just as 2 guards entered. "Check everything," one said. "Commander wants a visual confirmation, not just sensor readings." Yuki waited in the ceiling for 10 minutes, then continued her mission. Over the next 3 hours, Yuki waged a psychological war against the Tauruvians. Lights flickered. Systems malfunctioned. Doors sealed unexpectedly, trapping guards in sections for minutes before releasing them. And guards started disappearing. A pair investigating the cargo hold found their partner unconscious in a storage container, stripped of his weapons and communicator. Another guard sent to check the engine room never reported back. They found him hours later, sedated and hidden in a maintenance shaft. No blood, no violence. The guard simply vanished. Fear began spreading through the crew. "This isn't a rival slaver," one guard whispered to another, not knowing Yuki was listening through the communicator she'd stolen. "Slavers fight for profit. They don't do this. The ship is haunted." Yuki had reduced his guard force to 15. 5 unconscious guards were hidden in various locations throughout the ship, and Vrexnel had made a critical mistake. Fearing for the safety of his valuable merchandise, he'd ordered all remaining guards to concentrate around the holding cells. Every guard was now on Deck 4, protecting the prisoners, which meant the rest of the ship was undefended. Yuki accessed the environmental controls one more time. She disabled the gravity generators in 3 specific sections, sealed the bulkhead doors, and then made her way to Deck 4. The corridor leading to the holding cells was crowded with Tauruvian guards. 15 of them, all armed, all watching the corridor approaches. They were watching the wrong direction. Yuki had come from above, through the ceiling maintenance access. She positioned herself directly over the holding cell area and looked down through a grating. Ambassador Chen sat in his cell, alert despite his injuries. He was watching the guards, clearly trying to understand what was happening. The other human prisoners looked confused and frightened by the chaos. Yuki checked her chronometer. 37 hours left. Time to move. She pulled out the 3 stun grenades she'd taken from medical and carefully positioned them in the ventilation system. Then she programmed a sequence in her communicator. 3, 2, 1. The grenades detonated simultaneously, filling the corridor with blinding light and deafening sound. The Tauruvian guards stumbled, their sensitive eyes and ears overwhelmed by the sensory assault. Yuki dropped from the ceiling. She landed in the middle of the chaos, moving with practiced precision. Her polymer blade flashed, cutting through weapon straps and communication devices. Guards swung blindly, but Yuki was already past them. She reached the cell controls and used the stolen access card. The transparent barriers deactivated. "Chen," she called out, "take the Yuki Ghost Protocol, we're leaving now." "I'll cover you." She held no weapon, just her hands and her training. A guard charged at her. Yuki sidestepped, used his momentum to throw him into another guard. 2 more came at her from different angles. She ducked under a plasma rifle swing, swept one guard's legs, and struck the other's throat with precise force. The Tauruvians had never fought anyone like her. They were used to using superior firepower against weaker opponents. They had no training in close combat because they'd never needed it. Yuki had trained for 8 years for exactly this scenario. "The prisoners are reaching the airlock," someone shouted. Vrexnel pushed through his guards and faced Yuki directly. He was massive, nearly twice her size, covered in armor and carrying a plasma rifle. "One little human," he hissed. "You think you can defeat me? I just need to delay you. Don't wait for me." She used every dirty trick from human combat history. Threw equipment to trip guards, sealed doors behind her, triggered more environmental malfunctions. And then, as she reached the final corridor before the airlock, Vrexnel caught up to her. He grabbed her from behind with one massive hand, lifting her off the ground. "Clever little creature," he snarled, "but you failed." Through the viewport, Yuki could see UN fleet vessels dropping out of FTL, their weapons powered and ready. Vrexnel's face went pale. Impossible.